Greetings, Rebecca. Thank you for joining us today. It's a chance to talk with our local experts about issues related to well-being. And of course, your name is one of the first on the list, and I know you've been involved with our well-being fairs and all the things that aren't exactly happening the same way. So thank you. So I wonder if we can start with you just introducing yourself, what you do here at UMass. And we're talking about sleep today, which is critically important. And so we'll follow up from there.
Yeah, hi, I'm Rebecca Spencer, and I'm a professor in the Department of Psychological and Brain Sciences, and I study sleep, and I've been doing that for probably about 15 years now. And thanks for having me.
Great. Where are you located these days, by the way?
I'm most often at our place in Vermont.
Okay, thus the reception.
Yes, it does come and go. Yeah.
Yeah, it does come and go. You don't realize how many places in the country have, are out there, but
and now sharing it with my kids doesn't help.
That's the piece, right? So you've studied sleep research. How did you get into studying sleep? And then I'm going to ask you how your sleep has been.
Yeah, my trajectory into sleep was really accidental. There was a type of learning that I was studying that somebody else reported was influenced by sleep, and I wanted to know how, I wanted to know why. It was really interesting to me that sleep would have anything to do in learning some 15 years ago, and that's something that we now accept as fact. So I just got intrigued by some of the stories that were coming out from other labs and was excited to follow up on it. And one of our early observations was that this benefit of sleep goes away as we get older. And that was kind of an accidental observation that once you had that interesting idea, I had to follow up on it, and then everything continued from there. And then you asked, how is my own sleep? Yeah. And I'm happy to comment on that. I think I've always been a morning person. So I'm what we call a lark. And I like to get up really early and get my run in first thing. I'm also a very habitual sleeper. So I go to bed and wake up at the same time every night and every morning. And I think that's just the way I've always been kind of ingrained to be. It's about my own kind of health rule setting. But it turns out that those are also the things we preach as sleep scientists. I think I've kind of accidentally stumbled into what is really good, what we now call sleep hygiene. And now I can see and understand why it's so important to go to bed and wake up same time, night after night and morning after morning, but also you can be a morning person, you could be an evening person, but it's important to really live within whatever clock you were assigned.
Why is that so important?
So a lot of work that's been done in recent decades on circadian rhythms, which is your 24-hour clock, has shown that doing things outside of our 24-hour clock.
We're starting again because, like the rest of the world, we're having connection problems. I know you all can empathize with that. My name is Betsy Krakow, and I am the Assistant Vice Chancellor of Campus Life and Wellbeing. I have to think about that for a second. And these are the Wellbeing Wednesday messages. So we have our very own Rebecca Spencer with us today. I'm going to have Rebecca introduce herself and what she does, and then we'll get right into the topic.
Hi, I'm Professor Spencer, and I am a professor of psychological and brain sciences, and I study sleep. I've been studying sleep for about 15 years, and I also teach classes on sleep as well.
Okay, so I'm not going to pretend we didn't just have 10 minutes or 5 minutes of a conversation. You were mentioning earlier that you got into studying sleep research because of the connection between sleep and learning. And some finding that those effects kind of fade with age. Can you say a little bit more about that? Or I might have misunderstood the interpretation of that.
I'm just making sure that my reception's still okay for you.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt that. Yeah, so for better or worse, it turns out that the benefit that we see that sleep has on learning actually goes down with age, which kind of maps onto the fact that sleep time goes down with age, but we also see certain features of sleep change with age as well. So part of our research interest is to understand that relationship and to understand what about sleep changes so that potentially someday you could treat your sleep, improve your sleep, and then help the memory deficits that a lot of older adults have.
Mm. So in terms of, we have some older adults, obviously, who are students in our population, but mostly we're talking about 18 to 24-year-olds who may not give that much thought to sleep, or maybe they do. What's your experience in talking to your students? Where are they at with their sleep, and what do they say?
Well, so a lot of the students have a few problems with sleep. Number one, I would say it's the first thing to go when you get too busy. And I think the problem with that is some of those times we're really busy when we're preparing for an exam. That's when you need sleep to help you remember things. When you're under a lot of stress and maybe processing a lot of negative emotions, but at the same time, that's when we need sleep's help to help us process those things. So that's one observation. Another observation is our college students are transitioning from being real kind of night owls, as you tend to be as an adolescent, to becoming more normalized, someplace in the middle. And there's some students that are really going to suffer with those early morning classes. Even I ironically teach a sleep class at 8:30 in the morning. And I know that that's not a healthy time for a lot of students to wake up. And I would encourage them to, and unfortunately, as a freshman, you're not able to choose your classes well enough to steer around these things. But you do have to teach yourself to be able to wake up in time for those classes, teach yourself to be able to take exams early in the morning. So those are the primary observations. I think overall, students don't come in with good natural sleep hygiene. And it's helpful if you have good hygiene, which are those things that we do during our day that help us sleep better at night. So exposing yourself to light during the day, making sure that you're in dim light closer to falling asleep. We do the exact opposite. I'm teaching an online class, and unfortunately, I see a lot of my students in dark spaces, and that's only going to make you feel drowsy during my class. And then the opposite is true. Right before you go to bed, you're shining a phone or a laptop at your eyes, and that's going to prevent you from accessing your own natural melatonin. You have melatonin that you can use to help you feel sleepy, but if you're shining light at your eyes, the opposite's going to happen. That light is actually telling your brain, stay awake, and that's not what you want to do. So those are just some of the ways that I observe that our students are challenged with their sleep, but also because of their really tight time, they do what's called social jet lagging to themselves. So they binge sleep on the weekend and they short sleep on a weekday, which is basically like traveling across time zones. They live in a different time zone on the weekend than they do on a weekday. And that constant shifting from time zone to time zone overall is unhealthy to your body.
I never thought of it that way. It's the equivalent of flying to California and back when you hit Monday morning after going to bed Saturday night, Sunday morning at 3 a.m. and sleeping till 2 p.m. and then having the stress of trying to think after that and get your work done. Yeah. Have you tried putting students through exercises around sleep hygiene, and what have they reported? I assume in your classes where they're studying this, they might do some practical things.
Yeah, so we have worked on some, so one fun class did a documentary, and they observed roommates that were intentionally or unintentionally sleep depriving themselves, and how do you behave? And we see that you actually overeat as you get later into the night, as you get more and more sleep deprived, you overeat. You also go through this emotional dysregulation. So they'll be really nervous and grumpy with their roommates, and then suddenly they'll be giddy with their roommates. So you do go through this real emotional roller coaster as you get sleep deprived. But we can also observe the opposite. So we do have some students that have tried these, I'm just going to try to maintain a consistent sleep pattern. And even if your average time sleeping at night doesn't change, they observed that they felt better. So they were reporting that just generally they felt like they could pay attention more in class. So there are some really practical things that can be done. They're not always easy, but they're very practical. And if you can teach yourself, you might feel these really good overall health benefits.
I come from working in the student mental health space for my whole career. I actually think it's fairly epidemic what's going on with sleep in college students, and that a huge percentage of the mood issues that we see really could be regulated with better sleep. I have the thought of proposing some sort of lights out and no pizza delivery after a certain amount of time. I don't think that would go over well, but if there's a public health campaign ready to be born out of this, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and part of that is this living outside of your body clock. So your metabolism in your body is built to process food at certain times of day. So as soon as we're eating food outside that, we're having the pizza delivered to us at midnight, or we go, pick up something from the food truck late at night. Unfortunately, our bodies aren't built to process food at that time of night. And so then you don't metabolize it appropriately. And this is what's really thought to underlie part of the obesity epidemic is we're eating foods against our clock, and we really need to live within the body clock that we are assigned.
I don't think that point gets as much play as I would think it would. I mean, we all know like we're not supposed to eat before, and a lot of people have done this intermittent fasting, which is just probably what you're talking about, is don't eat in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and I think I agree that this has not gotten much play, but I'm hearing it more and more, and I do think this is a health message to get out, is sleep is important, but then there's also just living within your 24-hour clock. So it's one thing to be sleeping at night, but it's also avoiding those other things that we tend to do at night and making sure that the other behaviors that we have, physical activity and eating, that they're also following a really routine pattern, because your body is entrained to do certain things at certain times. And every time we're jumping around in that rhythm, we become less efficient at it. So overall, living within that rhythm is now thought to not just reduce obesity, but it's also thought to improve your mental health, because we're now doing things that we're processing food better, we're processing our emotions better by living within that 24-hour clock.
So in terms of COVID, I guess there's some obvious things that might be going on. I'm wondering if for college students, there's some course correction here, because many are living back at home, and I assume their parents are going to bed at or whoever lives in their house might be more regular than the average college student. But what are you hearing, or I'm sure you're being asked by the press too, what's going on with COVID and sleep?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. So for one, and at least initially, people were sleeping better because they had less. I mean, it's just some of those social constraints that we put on ourselves, where we're not going out in the evening. We maybe have less of a commute in the morning. And so we are able to give ourselves more time to sleep. However, the thing that's countering that is a lot of people are experiencing emotion problems that are making it maybe harder to sleep, schedule inconsistencies. So if you don't have something to hold yourself to doing something at the same time of day, so maybe if all of your classes are asynchronous and there's no schedule to tell you wake up at this time and go to sleep at this time in order to be awake for that class, then you start getting these really inconsistent schedules. And if you add to that you're maybe in a dark room studying or something like that, so you also don't have light cues that are helping you maintain a good natural rhythm. So those things actually add up to causing sleep problems. And so I think initially there was this burst, let me catch up on sleep, but now I think people are struggling to adapt to maybe a new reality. We also have we do have some students that are at home that maybe allows them to have a good rhythm, but they might have shift working parents that actually can disturb their sleep. They might instead be living off campus with a roommate who could disturb their sleep. So there's some things we can do to just regulate that environment that we were given that we can't control. So one thing that we can do is, if you find your family or your roommates are loud, I suggest using a white noise app to try to minimize those distractions. If you find lights coming in your window, maybe because of wherever you're living, a parking lot or something, using light blocking shades so that you're able to sleep when you want to, but then making sure you wide open those shades during the day and get lots of natural light to keep you awake when you need to be awake. Really giving yourself that burst of bright natural light early in the morning is one thing we can do to really kind of turn on our brains in the morning. So whatever you do when you get out of bed, go sit by a window, or when the weather's better, sit outside. So because that natural light can be a good way to alert you and kind of say, wake up now, and get your brain attuned and ready for a class like mine. But then again, remembering the other side of the coin is reducing that light towards the end of the day.
Yeah. I don't think that we think about that as much because we have such indoor lives to some degree. Although I just went outside at lunchtime to sit in the sun.
And I think as it gets colder, we tend to do that more and more. So it's something we have to be aware of. As we get colder, we are outside less. The other thing for our students is we took for granted maybe those walks across campus, which were bursts of natural light, bursts of exercise. we're all just sitting. So build into your routine those opportunities to get the natural light, get exercise, because those are all cues to your body of here's my natural rhythm. And those are all the cues of this is day versus night. And we took for granted how much those walks across campus did for us between classes, a year ago, and we're not getting those cues now.
It makes a difference. And it's
Yeah.
not, so to your point about the body's rhythm is more than just sleep, right? The rhythm of movement that happens during the day, and at night that slows down. And if we're just sitting all day, our body's not getting that cue. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
Helpful. Well, I had one other trailing question, but obviously substances must be something that is disruptive. I wonder if you could just speak to that, because I've looked at some data this morning from the CDC, and it looks like, especially for 18 to 24-year-olds, the use of substance to try and cope with things is on the rise.
Yeah, and so we could talk about each substance has its own individual effects, and I would say, unfortunately, none of them, even FDA-approved sleep medications, are really doing for your sleep what you want it to. So there are some substances, including the FDA-approved medications, that might help you seem like you're sleeping for a more consistent amount of time, but they often offer things that are counter to this cognitive improvement that you want to get out of sleep. We also have substances like cannabis that that people have heard. There's rumors out there that it actually improves sleep, but actually being in the sleep field, that field is very split, and there is not consistent evidence that it improves sleep. There is some thought that perhaps if you have a problem sleeping because of anxiety or depression, that it could help in the relaxing kind of effects to help those symptoms, which then would help your sleep. But if that's the case, you really need to focus on the actual problem, right? There's other ways, there's better ways, there's therapy to be able to treat your depression and anxiety, whatever is keeping you from falling asleep at night. There's healthier ways to approach that, because cannabis too can actually cause these counter effects to all these cognitive benefits that I'm talking about sleep giving you. Alcohol, so some people hear like red wine can help you fall asleep. Problem is, something like red wine will help you fall asleep, but it actually destroys your sleep the rest of the night. You're going to be up a lot more, and it destroys the content of your sleep, which sleep stages you go through, and other forms of alcohol do that as well. So overall, there's no magic substance out there, and instead there's a lot of behavioral things you can do to improve your sleep. Just practicing good sleep hygiene has actually been shown to have benefits that are equivalent to a lot of sleep medications, and then in fact can leave you cognitively better off than sleep medications, since sleep medications have this counteracting effect of actually harming how clearly you can think during the day.
Yeah, and I mean, that is the student's primary task, and in general is this capacity to think, but the capacity to be well too is what we're hoping for our students, and it's an uphill battle. I mean, the stress for sure for everyone involved in all of our systems, and everyone that we have contact with is feeling it. So I think some of these tips are ones that I hope students will take advantage of, and even support one another in it. We have some programs going on of peer support, and I hope that they'll remind each other to sort of take the challenge. And I think next semester we have to fire up some sort of public health campaign. So we'll call you back. But this, calorie
I'm on board.
intake thing, there's something there that's very big. So
yeah, everybody has a lot more they can be doing with their sleep, and sleep just impacts so many other parts of us, our physical health and our mental health, and that I really feel like it is. To me, and I'm biased after 15 years of research, but it is the linchpin of kind of really good, strong health outcomes for our students. So I hope that they can, learn some of these tips and tricks to do better.